Waitress surprises Millionaire with a kiss in front of everyone. The reason? He burst into tears. The autumn wind whistled through the concrete canyons of Manhattan, carrying with it the whispers of change. Inside L'Etoile, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, the soft glow of crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. Jolene Carter moved between the tables with practiced grace, her chocolate-brown skin luminescent under the warm lighting, her naturally curly hair pulled back in a neat bun that somehow managed to look both professional and effortlessly stylish. At 26, Jolene had mastered the art of reading people. 5 years of waiting tables at L'Etoile had taught her to recognize the subtle signals, the slight tilt of a wine glass indicating a desired refill, the barely perceptible nod that meant the check was needed, the particular way wealthy patrons adjusted their watches when growing impatient. But tonight, something different caught her attention, something that transcended her usual observations. Table 19, tucked away in the restaurant's most discreet corner, held a man whose presence seemed to command attention even in stillness. Ashton Blake sat alone, his tailored suit a dark contrast against the cream-colored chair. He was striking, with features that belonged on a magazine cover. But it wasn't his obvious good looks that drew Jolene's gaze. It was the profound sadness in his deep blue eyes, a pain so tangible it seemed to create its own gravity. "That's Ashton Blake," Naomi Rodriguez, her best friend and fellow waitress, whispered as they crossed paths near the kitchen. "The tech mogul. Word is his company just hit another billion in valuation, but—" She paused, glancing at the solitary figure. "I've never seen him look so broken." Jolene nodded, unable to tear her eyes away from the man. She'd seen wealth before. L'Etoile catered exclusively to New York's elite, but there was something different about him. Beyond the perfectly tailored suit and the obvious signs of success, she recognized a familiar kind of loneliness, one that resonated with her own carefully guarded heart. Throughout the evening, she found herself drawn back to his table, not just out of professional obligation, but because of an inexplicable pull she couldn't quite understand. Each time she approached, she noticed more details, the way his fingers absently traced the rim of his untouched wine glass, the slight tremor in his hand when he checked his phone, the distant look in his eyes that suggested he was seeing something far beyond the restaurant's elegant walls. As the night wore on, the restaurant gradually emptied, until only a handful of tables remained occupied. The usual bustling energy of L'Etoile settled into a gentle hum, and the soft jazz from the piano bar seemed to grow more melancholic with each passing minute. Jolene was making her final rounds when she noticed something that made her heart catch, a single tear trailing down Ashton Blake's cheek. In that moment, all her carefully constructed rules about maintaining professional distance evaporated. Before she could second-guess herself, she was moving toward his table, driven by an impulse she couldn't explain. Time seemed to slow as she approached. Later, she would try to rationalize her actions, to understand what possessed her to do something so completely out of character. But in that moment, seeing such raw pain in his eyes, all she knew was that she couldn't walk away. She leaned down, close enough to catch the subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive and understated, like everything else about him. "Sometimes," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the piano's soft notes, "we need to be reminded that we're still alive." And then, in a moment that would change both their lives forever, she kissed him. It was gentle, barely more than a brush of her lips against his, but in that brief contact she felt something electric pass between them. His lips were soft, surprising for someone who seemed carved from marble, and she felt his sharp intake of breath at the contact. The kiss lasted only seconds, but when Jolene pulled away, the world seemed to have shifted on its axis. Ashton's eyes were wide with surprise, the sadness in them temporarily replaced by something else, wonder perhaps, or the ghost of hope. She straightened up, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I'm sorry," she said, though she wasn't. "Not really. I couldn't bear to see someone hurting so deeply without doing something." For a long moment, he just stared at her, and Jolene felt the weight of what she'd done settle over her. She'd just kissed a customer, not just any customer, but one of the most powerful men in New York. She'd probably lost her job, might even be sued for harassment. All her dreams of opening her own bakery could disappear because of one impulsive moment. But then Ashton Blake did something that surprised her even more than her own actions. He smiled. It was small, barely there, but it transformed his entire face, softening the sharp angles and bringing warmth to those ice-blue eyes. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low and rich, with a slight roughness that suggested he hadn't spoken much that evening. "Jolene," she answered, fighting the urge to flee. "Jolene Carter." He nodded slowly, as if committing the name to memory. "Thank you, Jolene Carter," he said, and somehow he made her name sound like poetry. "I think I needed that reminder more than you know." She managed to smile, though her heart was still racing. "Good night, Mr. Blake," she said, turning to leave. "Ashton," he called after her, causing her to pause. "Please, call me Ashton." That night, as Jolene rode the subway back to her small apartment in Brooklyn, she couldn't stop touching her lips, remembering the feel of that brief kiss. She'd broken every rule she'd ever made for herself about maintaining professional boundaries, about not getting involved with customers, about keeping her heart safely guarded. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Something had passed between them in that moment, something that felt like destiny, though she'd never believed in such things before. That kiss, she sensed, was just the beginning of a story she never expected to be part of. What she didn't know then was just how right she was, and how that one impulsive moment would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and the power of taking chances. Morning light filtered through the industrial windows of Jolene's Brooklyn apartment, casting long shadows across her small but meticulously organized kitchen. She stood at her vintage countertop, mindlessly stirring her coffee as the events of the previous night played on repeat in her mind. The memory of the kiss felt almost dreamlike now, as if it had happened to someone else. "You did what?" Naomi's voice crackled through her phone's speaker, a mix of shock and amusement. "Girl, you kissed Ashton Blake? The Ashton Blake? The same man whose face is plastered across half the tech magazines in the city?" Jolene groaned, pressing her forehead against the cool surface of her refrigerator. I know, it was crazy. I don't even recognize myself. What was I thinking?" "Maybe you weren't thinking," Naomi said, her tone softening. "So maybe you were just feeling. When was the last time you let yourself do that?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortably accurate. Jolene's eyes drifted to the collection of cookbooks lining her kitchen shelf, particularly to the worn copy of her grandmother's handwritten recipes. Rose Carter had raised her with a mixture of tough love and unwavering support, teaching her that independence was the only reliable shield against disappointment. "I should be worried about losing my job," Jolene said, changing the subject. "Instead, I keep thinking about the way he looked at me afterward, like what? Like I woke something up inside him." Across town, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Ashton Blake stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city come alive below. His reflection stared back at him, perfectly pressed suit, not a hair out of place, the very image of control. But his composure was just another carefully constructed facade, like so many things in his life. "Sir," Danny Brooks, his personal assistant and closest friend, appeared in the doorway of his home office. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Ashton nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He could still feel the ghost of Jolene's kiss, the surprising softness of her lips, the way her gentle gesture had cracked through years of carefully maintained walls. No one had dared to be so boldly compassionate with him since Rachel's death. "Danny," he said suddenly, "what do you know about El Etoile's staff?" Danny raised an eyebrow, his usually playful expression turning curious. "The restaurant? Not much, except that you've been going there more often lately, usually on their quieter nights." He paused, studying his friend's face. "Sure, does this have something to do with why you seem different this morning?" "Different? Less?" Danny gestured vaguely. "Automated." Ashton turned from the window, his fingers automatically adjusting his cufflinks, a nervous habit he'd developed over years of high-stakes meetings. "I met someone there, someone who did something unexpected. Unexpected good or unexpected bad? I'm not sure yet." Ashton picked up his phone, looking at the restaurant's website. He'd already memorized the days Jolene usually worked, having noticed her quiet efficiency over his past few visits. But last night had revealed a completely different side of her, brave, impulsive, genuine in a way that both terrified and fascinated him. The day passed in a blur of meetings and conference calls, but Ashton couldn't focus. Instead of quarterly projections and market analyses, he kept seeing Jolene's face, the warmth in her brown eyes, the gentle curve of her smile, the way she'd looked at him with such pure empathy. That evening, against his better judgment, He found himself back at L'Etoile. But Jolene wasn't there. Instead, he recognized her friend, Naomi, according to her name tag, who gave him a knowing look as she took his order. "She's not working tonight," Naomi said, her direct gaze challenging him to pretend that wasn't why he'd come. "I see." Ashton maintained his composed expression, though something like disappointment flickered in his chest. "When you see her, would you give her this?" He handed Naomi a small envelope. Meanwhile, Jolene was across the bridge in Brooklyn, kneading dough in her tiny kitchen. Baking had always been her escape, her way of processing emotions she couldn't quite name. Tonight, she was attempting her grandmother's famous cinnamon rolls, though her thoughts kept drifting to blue eyes and the scent of expensive cologne. Her phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. "Your CEO was here tonight. Left something for you." Jolene's hands froze in the dough. "What did he leave? An envelope? Want me to open it?" "No." Jolene typed quickly, then deleted it, tried again. "I'll get it tomorrow." She returned to her baking, but now her movements were distracted. What could he want? To warn her about a lawsuit? To fire her personally? Or maybe... The next morning, Jolene arrived at work early, her heart pounding as Naomi handed her the envelope. Inside was a simple note, written in elegant handwriting. "Dear Jolene, thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be alive. I'd like to return the favor. If you're willing, meet me at the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park this Saturday at sunset. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to talk. Ashton P.S. I promise not to sue you for the kiss." Jolene read the note 3 times, her fingers tracing the words. The playful postscript surprised her. She wouldn't have expected him to have a sense of humor. "Well," Naomi appeared at her shoulder. "What does it say?" "He wants to meet me." "Of course he does. You can't kiss a man like that and expect him to just forget about it." Naomi squeezed her arm. "The question is, are you going to go?" Jolene folded the note carefully, tucking it into her pocket. Every practical instinct she possessed was screaming at her to stay away. She had plans, goals, dreams that didn't involve getting tangled up with a wealthy man who clearly carried deep emotional wounds. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. "The only person you can count on is yourself." But another voice, smaller but persistent, whispered of possibilities, of the way his smile had transformed his face after their kiss, of the courage it must have taken for someone like him to reach out, to make himself vulnerable to rejection. "I don't know," she said finally. "Meeting him would be an adventure," Naomi finished for her. "When was the last time you let yourself have one of those?" Later that night, after her shift ended, Jolene stood at her kitchen window, looking out at the city lights. The note sat on her counter, its words seeming to glow in the darkness. She picked up her phone and, before she could talk herself out of it, typed a message to the number he'd included. "Saturday at sunset. I'll be there, but I have one condition. No fancy restaurants. If we're going to talk, let's do it somewhere real. Jolene P.S. I'm glad you're not suing me. That would have really ruined the romance of the moment." Across the city, in his penthouse office, Ashton's phone buzzed. Reading her message, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation, hope, the foreign sensation of smiling for no reason at all. "Danny," he called to his assistant, who was preparing to leave for the day. "Clear my schedule for Saturday evening." Danny looked up, surprised. "Fire the investor meeting? Reschedule it. The charity gala. Send my regrets." Danny studied his friend's face, noting the subtle but significant changes, the softened tension around his eyes, the slight upturn of his lips, the way he seemed more present in the moment rather than lost in painful memories. "Something more important?" Danny asked, though he already knew the answer. Ashton looked out at the city lights, thinking of warm brown eyes and a kiss that had awakened him from a long, cold sleep. "Maybe," he said softly, "maybe something much more important." Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made New York City feel magical. Golden light filtered through crimson leaves, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of roasted chestnuts from nearby street vendors. Jolene stood before her mirror, questioning her outfit choice for the 20th time. She'd settled on dark jeans, ankle boots, and a soft burgundy sweater that complemented her skin tone, casual but put together, exactly as she'd intended. "You're overthinking this," she told her reflection, touching the small gold pendant her grandmother had given her for her 16th birthday. The familiar gesture calmed her nerves, grounding her in who she was, a woman who didn't need anyone's approval, least of all a billionaire's. Across the park, in his penthouse, Ashton was having his own internal debate. He stood in his massive walk-in closet, surrounded by suits worth more than most cars, yet found himself reaching for dark jeans and a charcoal cashmere sweater. "The world really is ending," Danny commented from the doorway, eyebrows raised at the sight of his boss in casual wear. "First you reschedule the Beijing conference call, now this." "Sometimes change is necessary," Ashton replied, running a hand through his hair, deliberately messing up its usual perfect arrangement. He caught Danny's knowing smirk in the mirror. "What?" "Nothing," Danny said, raising his hands in surrender. "Just, it's nice to see you acting human again. Whoever this woman is, she's already good for you." Ashton's expression softened. "She kissed me when I was drowning in memories of Rachel and James. Didn't try to fix me or offer empty platitudes. Just reminded me that I could still feel something besides grief." Danny nodded, understanding the weight of this admission. He'd been there through it all. The tragic accident that took Ashton's wife and son 3 years ago. The months of hollow-eyed grieving. The gradual transformation into the cold, efficient businessman everyone now knew. "Just be careful," he said quietly, "with both her heart and yours." The sun was beginning its descent when Jolene arrived at Bethesda Fountain. She'd come early, needing time to settle her nerves, and found herself watching the usual parade of park life. Tourists taking photos, children chasing pigeons, street musicians filling the air with melody. "You're early too," a familiar voice said behind her. Jolene turned to find Ashton standing there, looking surprisingly approachable in casual clothes, his hair slightly tousled by the breeze. Something in her chest tightened at the sight of him. He looked younger somehow, more real. "I like watching the park at this hour," she said, gesturing to the scene before them. "Everyone has a story here." "Tell me one," he said, moving to stand beside her. Jolene pointed to an elderly couple sharing a pretzel on a nearby bench. "They've been coming here every Saturday for 40 years. It's where they had their first date. They ordered a pretzel then too, and now it's their tradition." "You made that up," Ashton said, but he was smiling. "Maybe, but isn't it better than the truth, that they're probably just tourists who were hungry?" He studied her profile, intrigued by the way her mind worked. "You see magic in ordinary things, and you probably see spreadsheets and profit margins," she teased, then immediately worried she'd offended him. But Ashton laughed, a real laugh that transformed his entire face. "Guilty as charged, though lately I've been seeing other things too." His eyes met hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch, like the way a simple act of kindness can shake someone's entire world. Jolene felt her cheeks warm. "About that night, I'm not usually so impulsive." "No," he raised an eyebrow. "Shame." "I found it refreshing." They began walking, falling into an easy rhythm together. Jolene led them away from the tourist-heavy areas, down quieter paths where the setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber. "My grandmother would be horrified," Jolene said, stepping over a fallen branch. "She raised me to be practical, cautious. The world doesn't give handouts to girls like us," she always said. "Tell me about her," Ashton requested, genuinely interested. "Rose Carter is a force of nature. Raised me by herself after my parents died in a car accident when I was 4. Worked 2 jobs, made sure I had everything I needed, taught me to bake." Jolene smiled at the memories. "She's the reason I dream of opening my own bakery someday. Her recipes are magic." Ashton watched the way her face lit up talking about her grandmother and baking. It was the same passion he recognized in successful entrepreneurs, the same fire that had driven him in his early days. "What's stopping you? Reality? Money? The fact that most small businesses fail in their first year?" Jolene shrugged. "I'm saving what I can from tips, but at this rate, I'll be 60 before I can afford to open my own place." They reached a small bridge over one of the park's quieter streams. Ashton stopped, turning to face her. "Let me help." "No." Jolene's response was immediate and firm. "That's not why I told you about it. I'm not looking for a handout." "It wouldn't be a handout. It would be an investment." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "But we can table that discussion for another time. Tell me something else. Why did you really kiss me that night?" The sudden change of topic caught her off guard. Jolene leaned against the bridge railing, gathering her thoughts. "Honestly, because I recognize the look in your eyes. It's the same one I saw in the mirror for months after my parents died, like you're drowning in memories and can't find the surface." Ashton's breath caught. No one had ever read him so accurately before. "My wife, Rachel," he said softly, "and our son, James, 3 years ago. Drunk driver." Jolene's hand found his on the railing, her fingers intertwining with his instinctively. She didn't offer condolences or platitudes, just quiet understanding and the warmth of human contact. They stood there as the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the park. In the distance, a street musician began playing "What a Wonderful World" on a saxophone, the melody floating to them on the evening breeze. "Dance with me," Jolene said suddenly. Ashton blinked. "Here, now. Why not? No one's watching except the squirrels, and they're terrible gossips anyway." Before he could protest, she'd pulled him into a gentle sway, one hand still in his, the other resting lightly on his shoulder. After a moment of stiffness, he relaxed, his free hand finding her waist. "I haven't danced since," he started. "Then it's about time," she said softly. "Life's too short not to dance when you hear good music." As they moved together in the fading light, something shifted between them. The careful distance they'd been maintaining began to dissolve, replaced by something warmer, more real. "You're dangerous, Jolene Carter," Ashton murmured. "Oh?" She looked up at him, a challenge in her eyes. "How so?" "You make me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need anymore." The music faded, but they continued swaying slightly, neither wanting to break the moment. Finally, Jolene stepped back, though their hands remained linked. "I should get home," she said. "Early shift tomorrow." Ashton nodded, but didn't release her hand. "So let me drive you. I have a perfectly good Metro card," she protested, but her smile betrayed her. "Humor me." He pulled out his phone. "I promise no fancy cars, just a regular taxi." "Liar. I bet you haven't taken a regular taxi in years." "Then it's time I remembered how." He smiled, and Jolene felt her heart skip. "Besides, I'm not ready to say goodnight yet." Later, as his private car, despite his promise, wound through the streets toward Brooklyn, they sat in comfortable silence. Jolene watched the city lights blur past, acutely aware of Ashton's presence beside her, of the way his hand still held hers, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you," he said, as they pulled up to her building. "For what?" "For seeing me. Not the CEO, not the grieving widower, just me." Jolene squeezed his hand once before letting go. "Thank you for letting me." She was halfway up her building's steps when he called after her. "Jolene." She turned, heart pounding at the way he said her name. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? Somewhere real, I promise. No fancy restaurants." A smile spread across her face. "I know a great pizza place in Williamsburg. Best slice in Brooklyn." "It's a date," he said, and the word hung in the air between them, full of possibility. As Jolene climbed the stairs to her apartment, she couldn't stop smiling. Her grandmother's warnings about practical choices and careful living echoed in her mind, but for once, they were drowned out by the memory of dancing in Central Park and the feeling of her hand in his. In his car, heading back to Manhattan, Ashton touched his lips, remembering her kiss from that first night. For the first time in 3 years, the memory of Rachel didn't bring crushing pain, just a gentle sadness and, surprisingly, a whisper of gratitude. Wherever she was, he hoped she would be happy knowing he was finally learning to live again. Sunday evening found Ashton Blake standing outside Sal's Pizzeria in Williamsburg, feeling distinctly out of his element. The small storefront, with its faded awning and neon open sign, was a far cry from his usual dining establishments, yet something about its unpretentious charm made him smile. Through the window, he could see Jolene already inside, chatting animatedly with an elderly man behind the counter. When he pushed open the door, the bell's cheerful jingle mixed with the scent of fresh-baked dough and marinara sauce. Jolene turned, her face lighting up at the sight of him. She wore a simple denim dress with boots, her curls loose around her shoulders, and Ashton thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "You actually came," she said, genuine surprise in her voice. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Honestly, I half expected a text about an emergency board meeting." She gestured to the man behind the counter. "Ashton, meet Sal. He's been feeding me the best pizza in New York since I was 12. Sal, a short Italian man with thick glasses and flour-dusted hands, gave Ashton an appraising look. "So this is the fancy businessman my Jolene's been talking about. Come, come, I have your table ready." "My table?" Ashton raised an eyebrow at Jolene. She laughed. "Sal thinks every first date deserves the unspecial table, though usually it's just the cleanest one by the window." "First date?" Sal's eyes widened. "But Piccola, you said you already kissed him." "That was different," Jolene mumbled, her cheeks warming. "Can we have our pizza now?" Sal winked at Ashton. She's been coming here since she was this high. He held his hand at waist level, always ordering the same thing, margarita with extra basil. Some things never change. As they settled into their booth, which was indeed by the window, Ashton found himself charmed by the restaurant's worn comfort. Christmas lights strung year-round cast a warm glow, and signed photos of local celebrities covered the walls. It felt lived in, loved. So, Jolene said, crossing her arms on the red checkered tablecloth. When was the last time you ate pizza that didn't come from a five-star restaurant? Would you believe me if I said college? That's tragic. She shook her head in mock dismay. Good thing I'm here to reintroduce you to real food. Their pizza arrived, steam rising from its perfectly blistered crust. Ashton watched in amusement as Jolene demonstrated the proper way to eat a New York slice, folding it lengthwise, oil dripping onto the paper plate. Your turn, she challenged. He mimicked her technique, surprised by the burst of flavors, the sweet tart marinara, the fresh basil, the perfect balance of cheese. This is incredible. Better than El Étoile. Different. But yes, in its own way. He wiped his mouth with a paper napkin, so far from the linen ones he was used to. Everything feels different lately. Jolene's expression softened. Good different or scary different? Both. He met her eyes. You make me feel things I thought I'd buried for good. It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I know the feeling. She traced patterns in the condensation on her water glass. When my parents died, I built walls so high I thought no one would ever scale them. Then my grandmother taught me that protecting your heart doesn't mean locking it away. It means being brave enough to let the right people in. Is that what you're doing with me, letting me in? I'm thinking about it. She smiled. Are you? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. Then again, and again. Ashton's face tightened as he glanced at the screen. Emergency? Jolene asked, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. No, he said firmly, turning the phone face down. Nothing that can't wait. But the moment had shifted. Jolene could see the tension creeping back into his shoulders, the way his eyes occasionally darted to the silent phone. She recognized the pull of responsibility, the weight of obligations. Tell me about your company, she said, changing the subject. What made you start it? Ashton's eyes lit up as he described the early days of his tech empire. I wanted to create something that would change how people connect, make distance irrelevant. After college, I worked out of my garage with just 2 computers and more coffee than blood in my veins. And now? Now we have offices in 12 countries and over 10,000 employees. He paused. But sometimes I miss that garage. Everything was simpler then. Before Rachel? Jolene asked gently. Actually, that's where I met her. She was our first investor's daughter, came to check on their investment, found me sleeping on a couch surrounded by empty energy drink cans. His smile was bittersweet. She said any man that dedicated deserved a real meal. Jolene reached across the table, taking his hand. She sounds wonderful. She and James were my whole world. His fingers tightened around hers, until they weren't. The pizza grew cold as they talked, sharing pieces of their past like trading cards. Jolene told him about her first attempts at baking, how she'd nearly burned down her grandmother's kitchen trying to make birthday cupcakes. Ashton described his first failed startup, a pet-sitting app that crashed spectacularly when the servers melted during a heatwave. As the evening wound down, Sal brought them cannoli on the house, though he winked at Jolene in a way that suggested she'd arranged it beforehand. My grandmother's recipe, she explained, as Ashton bit into the crispy shell. I've been teaching Sal's daughter how to make them. You could sell these, he said, savoring the perfect balance of sweet ricotta and dark chocolate. In your own bakery. Someday, she smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in it. So it's when I've saved enough. Jolene, he hesitated. Let me help, not as a handout, but as a business partner. I know potential when I see it. She shook her head. I need to do this on my own. Besides, she gestured between them, this, whatever it is complicated enough without mixing in business. What is this? He asked softly. Between us. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. With the apologetic look, he checked it. His face darkened. I have to take this, he said, standing. I'm sorry. It's the Tokyo office. Jolene watched through the window as he paced outside, his casual demeanor replaced by sharp gestures and furrowed brows. In that moment, the distance between their worlds felt vast again. When he returned, she'd already asked for the check. You should go, she said gently. Your empire needs you. Jolene, wait. It's okay, she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. This was nice, but maybe it's good to remember why people like us usually don't what? Don't deserve happiness. Don't get second chances. His voice was intense. Because that's what this feels like to me. A second chance I never expected. They stepped outside, the cool night air carrying the distant sounds of the city. Jolene looked up at him, memorizing the way the streetlight caught his eyes, the strong line of his jaw, the way he made her feel both safe and terrified. I can't be the person who holds you back, she said softly. Your work, your company, they need you. Maybe I need you more. The words seemed to surprise even him. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Stay, please. We can figure this out. For a moment, they stood frozen in time, the space between them electric with possibility. Then, in a move that echoed their first meeting, Jolene rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. Unlike their first kiss, this one was neither gentle nor brief. It was a question and an answer, a challenge and a surrender. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Jolene whispered against his lips, Okay, we'll figure it out. She stepped back, her smile both scared and brave. But I'm still not taking your money for my bakery. He laughed, the sound carrying down the quiet street. We'll see about that. From inside the pizzeria, Sal watched them through the window, a knowing smile on his face. In his 60 years of serving pizza, he'd seen countless first dates, but something about these two, the wealthy man who looked at his Jolene like she hung the moon, and the stubborn girl who'd finally met her match, told him this one was different. As Ashton's car pulled away from the curb, Jolene wrapped her arms around herself, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. Her phone buzzed with a text. Thank you for the best pizza I've had in 15 years. And for reminding me that some things are worth the risk. As she typed back, thank you for being willing to risk it, even if your phone manners need work. J. Walking home through the Brooklyn streets, Jolene hummed under her breath. The practical voice in her head, the one that sounded like her grandmother's act, was listing all the reasons this was a bad idea. But for once, her heart was louder, and it was singing. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ashton's penthouse office, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. He stood at his usual spot by the window, but instead of reviewing market reports, he was smiling at his phone. Your coffee's getting cold, Danny said, leaning against the doorframe. And you're smiling. Again. Hey, it's starting to freak people out. Am I really that bad usually? Ashton asked, looking up from Jolene's latest text, a photo of her latest baking experiment, chocolate croissants that looked professional enough to be in any high-end patisserie. Let's just say the board members are wondering if you've been replaced by a pod person. Danny picked up a stack of papers from Ashton's desk. Speaking of which, the acquisition meeting starts in 10 minutes. Ashton's expression shifted slightly. He hadn't told Jolene about today's meeting, about his company's plans to acquire a chain of upscale bakeries across the East Coast. Every time he thought about mentioning it, he remembered her fierce independence, her insistence on building her dream herself. Across town, Jolene was having her own moment of cultural collision. She stood in front of her closet, staring at her clothes with growing frustration. Tonight was Ashton's company gala, a black tie event she couldn't avoid without embarrassing him. You're overthinking this, Naomi said through the phone's speaker. Just wear that green dress from your cousin's wedding. To a gala where people probably wear dresses that cost more than my yearly rent. Jolene sank onto her bed. I don't know if I can do this, Naomi. His world is so different. Different doesn't mean worse, Naomi reminded her. Besides, you're not dating his world, you're dating him. Before Jolene could respond, a knock at her door interrupted them. Opening it, she found a delivery man holding a large white box with a gold ribbon. Inside was a dress that took her breath away, deep purple silk that seemed to shimmer between burgundy and midnight, depending on the light. The note attached read, "Because you shine in any world." So her first instinct was to refuse it, to send it back with a message about not needing expensive gifts. But something stopped her, perhaps the memory of his voice saying, "Let me in," or the realization that accepting help didn't always mean surrendering independence. That evening, as Jolene stepped into the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, she felt every eye turn toward her. The dress fit perfectly, making her feel both elegant and powerful. But it was Ashton's expression when he saw her that made her heart stop, a look of such pure admiration and pride, that all her doubts momentarily vanished. "You're breathtaking," he whispered, taking her hand. "The dress is beautiful," she said. "Thank you, though we need to talk about you spending this kind of money on me." "Later," he promised, leading her deeper into the crowd. "First, there are some people I'd like you to meet." What followed was a blur of introductions. Board members, investors, business partners. Jolene smiled and shook hands, acutely aware of the subtle evaluations happening behind every polite conversation. "So, Jolene?" A woman in diamonds worth more than Jolene's entire apartment building asked. "What do you do?" "I'm a waitress," she said proudly, refusing to be embarrassed. "At L'Etoile. And I'm working toward opening my own bakery." She felt Ashton's hand tighten supportively on her waist, but caught the slight widening of the woman's eyes, the quick glance at her companions. "How enterprising," the woman said, her tone suggesting anything but approval. Before Jolene could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Camera flashes illuminated a striking woman in her early 30s, her entrance causing a ripple of whispers through the crowd. "Who is that?" Jolene asked, noticing how Ashton's posture had suddenly stiffened. "Victoria Blackwood," he said quietly. "My former sister-in-law, Rachel's sister." Victoria spotted them immediately, making her way through the crowd with practiced grace. "Ashton," she said, air-kissing his cheek. "It's been too long." Her eyes fell on Jolene, sharp and assessing. "And who is this?" "Jolene Carter." Jolene introduced herself, meeting Victoria's gaze steadily. "Carter." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "I don't know that family." "You wouldn't," Jolene said pleasantly. "We're more pizza and subway passes than galas and trust funds." A tense silence followed, broken by Victoria's practiced laugh. "Oh, how refreshing." Ashton always did have a soft spot for helping people. She turned to him. "We need to talk about the foundation, darling. The annual memorial for Rachel and James is coming up." Jolene felt Ashton go completely still beside her. She'd known about the accident, but not about a foundation or memorial. Looking at his face, she saw the mask of control slipping, revealing the raw pain beneath. "Excuse me," he said abruptly, stepping away. "I need some air." Jolene watched him disappear onto the balcony, torn between following him and giving him space. Victoria made the decision for her. "Let him go," she said, her voice losing its social veneer. "You have no idea what he's been through, what Rachel meant to him, what she still means to him." "You're right," Jolene said quietly. "I don't know everything, but I do know what it's like to lose people you love. And I know that grief doesn't mean you stop living." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Just be careful, dear. Ashton has a habit of trying to fix things, or people. First it was Rachel's charity work, now it's your little bakery dreams. But eventually, reality sets in." The words hit home harder than Jolene wanted to admit. She thought of the dress she wore, of the way people had looked at her all evening. Was she just another project for him, another broken thing to fix? Outside on the balcony, she found Ashton gripping the railing, his knuckles white. Without a word, she stood beside him, offering silent support until his breathing steadied. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I should have warned you about Victoria, about all of this." "Why didn't you?" He turned to face her, his expression vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. "Because I'm terrified of losing you. The more you see of my world, the more I fear you'll realize it's too much, too complicated, too heavy with the past." Jolene reached up, straightening his bow tie with gentle hands. "Do you know what I thought when I first kissed you? That here was someone who understood loss but wasn't defined by it. Someone who needed reminding that life goes on, just like I once did. And now," his voice was barely a whisper, "now I think we're both scared. Of letting people in, of mixing our worlds, of risking our hearts again." She smiled softly. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared together is better than being safe apart." He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. Around them, the city lights twinkled like stars, and the faint sounds of the gala filtered through the glass doors. Two worlds colliding, neither quite ready to merge, but both worth fighting for. There's something else I need to tell you," he said, "about my company's latest acquisition." But before he could continue, Danny appeared at the balcony door. "Ashton, I'm sorry, but the Chinese investors are here. They're asking for you specifically." Jolene stepped back, smoothing her dress. "Go. We'll talk later." As she watched him return to his world of business and obligations, Jolene touched the silk of her borrowed dress. Victoria's words echoed in her mind. mixing with her own doubts. She loved Ashton. The realization hit her suddenly, though perhaps she'd known for weeks. But loving someone didn't automatically bridge the gaps between their worlds. Her phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. "How's the fancy party?" Jolene typed back, "Complicated, like everything else these days." Later that night, alone in her Brooklyn apartment, Jolene hung the purple dress carefully in her closet. It looked out of place among her simple clothes. Beautiful but foreign, much like she had felt at the gala. Yet when she closed her eyes, she didn't see the judgmental looks or remember Victoria's cutting words. Instead, she saw Ashton's face when he first saw her in the dress, the way he looked at her like she belonged anywhere she chose to be. Maybe that was the key, choosing to belong, choosing to fight for love despite the complications. Maybe some worlds were worth mixing, even if the process was messy and uncertain. Still, as she drifted off to sleep, one question nagged at her. What was Ashton going to tell her about his company's acquisition, and why did she have a feeling it would complicate things even further? The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Jolene was in her tiny kitchen, experimenting with a new recipe for lavender macarons, when Naomi burst through her door without knocking. "Have you seen this?" Naomi thrust her phone in Jolene's face, showing a business news website. The headline made Jolene's heart stop. "Blake Technologies acquires Sweet Dreams bakery chain for 50 million, plans East Coast expansion." Jolene's hands trembled as she read further. Sweet Dreams was the largest boutique bakery chain in New York, known for their artisanal pastries and prime locations. And now Ashton, her Ashton, had bought them. "Is this why he's been asking so many questions about your bakery plans?" Naomi asked gently. The macaron batter Jolene had been working on suddenly felt like lead in her stomach. All those conversations about her dreams, about wanting to do it on her own, had they just been market research? Her phone buzzed, Ashton's name lighting up the screen. She let it go to voicemail. Across town, Ashton paced his office, running his hands through his usually perfect hair. "File, she's not answering," he told Danny, who watched with growing concern. "The news wasn't supposed to break until next week, after I'd told her." "Maybe that's why they leaked it early," Danny suggested. "Victoria's still on the board of Sweet Dreams. She never liked the acquisition plan." Ashton stopped pacing, a cold realization settling over him. "She did this on purpose, to drive a wedge between me and Jolene." "Then don't let her succeed." Danny handed him his coat. "Go explain now." But when Ashton reached Jolene's apartment, no one answered his knock. Through the door, he could hear music playing, the old jazz record she always put on when baking. She was there, just choosing not to let him in. "Jolene, please," he called softly. "Let me explain." Inside, Jolene stood with her back against the door, fighting tears. The worst part wasn't even the acquisition. It was remembering how she'd opened up to him about her dreams, her struggles, her plans. Had he been evaluating the market potential the whole time? "Go away, Ashton. Not until you hear me out." His voice was pained. "This isn't what you think, really, because I think you've been playing me for weeks. All those questions about my business plan, about what makes a bakery successful." She wiped her eyes angrily. Was I just market research?" "God, no." The anguish in his voice made her pause. "I bought Sweet Dreams to give to you." Jolene's eyes widened. She yanked the door open, finding Ashton looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. "What?" "I was going to offer you a position as head pastry chef and creative director, give you complete creative control, resources to implement your vision. It was meant to be a surprise, a way to help without—" He trailed off at the look on her face. "Without what?" "Without me feeling like a charity case." Her voice was deadly quiet. "Did it ever occur to you that I wanted to build something of my own? That maybe success would mean more if I earned it myself? I was trying to help." "No, you were trying to fix me, just like Victoria said." Jolene stepped back into her apartment. "I'm not broken, Ashton. I'm not a problem to be solved with your millions. I'm just a woman who wanted to love you and build her own dreams at the same time." "Wanted?" He caught the past tense. "Jolene, please, I didn't mean to." "To what? To go behind my back? To make decisions about my life without consulting me?" She shook her head. "You know what hurts the most. I really thought you saw me, really saw me. Not as a project or an investment opportunity, but as an equal." "I do see you." He stepped forward, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Everything I did was because I believe in you, in your talent." "No," she said softly. "Everything you did was because you're used to controlling things, fixing things. But love isn't a business transaction, Ashton. and dreams aren't something you can buy and wrap up in a neat bow. The smell of burning suddenly filled the air. Jolene rushed to her kitchen, where her experimental macarons had gone from delicate lavender to charred black. Somehow, the ruined pastries broke something inside her. She began to laugh, but it quickly turned to tears. "I have to go to work," she said, not turning to look at him. "Please leave." "Jolene?" "Now, Ashton." That evening at El Etoile, Jolene moved through her shift in a daze. Every time the door chimed, her heart jumped. But it was never him. Part of her was relieved, while another part ached with his absence. "You look like you could use this," Naomi said, sliding a piece of Sal's pizza onto the break-room table. "I had Danny bring it over." Jolene raised an eyebrow. "You're talking to Danny now? Someone has to be the voice of reason between you two stubborn idiots." Naomi sat down. "He told me Ashton's been a wreck all day. Apparently, he cancelled all his meetings and just sat staring at old photos of you two on his phone. Good. He should feel bad. He does. But honey, maybe there's a middle ground here, between letting him buy you an empire and shutting him out completely." Jolene picked at the pizza, remembering their first date at Sal's. "He didn't trust me enough to tell me about the acquisition, didn't respect me enough to ask what I wanted." "No, he didn't," Naomi agreed. "But maybe that's because he's as scared as you are. Scared of losing you, scared of doing the wrong thing, scared of letting someone in after losing so much." Before Jolene could respond, her phone lit up with a text from Ashton. "I know I messed up, but before you decide anything, please come to the Sweet Dreams flagship store tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. There's something you need to see." "Are you going to go?" Naomi asked, reading over her shoulder. Jolene thought of all the reasons she shouldn't, her pride, her anger, her hurt, but she also thought of the way Ashton looked at her when she talked about her dreams, like he genuinely believed in them, like he believed in her. "I don't know," she said honestly. That night, unable to sleep, Jolene pulled out her grandmother's old recipe book. The pages were worn, stained with vanilla extract and butter, marked with notes in her grandmother's elegant handwriting. One note caught her eye. "Love, like baking, requires patience, forgiveness, and the courage to try again when things go wrong." Her phone buzzed with another text from Ashton. "I was wrong. I should have talked to you first. But please don't let my mistake cost us both a chance at happiness. Some things are worth fighting for even when we mess them up." Jolene traced her fingers over her grandmother's words again, then over Ashton's message. Both spoke of second chances, of the courage to try again. Finally, she typed back, 7 a.m. This better be good. Across the city, in his penthouse office, Ashton read her message and felt hope flutter in his chest. He looked at the plans spread across his desk, not just for Sweet Dreams, but for something new. Something that might bridge their worlds if she'd give him the chance to show her. "Please let me fix this," he whispered to the night sky. "Not by throwing money at it, but by showing her what I should have shown her all along, that I don't want to control her dreams. I want to be part of them." The early morning mist clung to Manhattan's streets as Jolene approached the Sweet Dreams flagship store. The bakery's elegant facade, with its gold-leafed windows and pristine awnings, seemed to mock everything she'd been working toward. This was what Ashton thought she wanted, a pre-packaged version of her dreams. She found him waiting outside, looking both powerful and vulnerable in a casual charcoal sweater rather than his usual suit. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept much either. "You came," he said softly, relief evident in his voice. "I almost didn't." She wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the morning chill. "Why are we here, Ashton?" Instead of answering, he handed her a key. "Open it." The interior of Sweet Dreams was nothing like she expected. Gone were the typical display cases and trendy decor. The space had been stripped bare, revealing beautiful exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the empty room. "I don't understand," Jolene said, turning to him. Ashton took a deep breath. "When I bought Sweet Dreams, it wasn't to give you a ready-made empire. It was to give you this." He gestured to the empty space. "A blank canvas, your canvas." He pulled out his phone, showing her architectural renderings. The acquisition included all their locations, but this one, their first and most prestigious, I wanted to be different. I wanted it to be yours. Jolene studied the plans, her heart racing. The designs showed a completely reimagined space. An open kitchen where customers could watch pastries being made, cozy seating areas with mismatched vintage furniture, a space that felt warm and personal rather than corporate. These details, she said, noticing familiar elements, the antique display case like my grandmother's, the herb garden in the window, everything you've ever mentioned wanting in your own place. I've been listening, Jolene. Maybe too much and not enough at the same time. She walked the empty space, her footsteps echoing. Why didn't you tell me? Because I'm an idiot. He ran a hand through his hair. Because I'm used to solving problems with grand gestures. Because I was afraid you'd say no before I could show you that this isn't about controlling your dream. It's about believing in it enough to invest everything I have. Everything you have is a lot more than most people get to start with, she pointed out. True, but what you have, your talent, your vision, your heart, that's worth more than any amount of money I could invest. He moved closer, but didn't touch her. I messed up by not talking to you first. I was so excited about surprising you that I forgot the most important part, respecting your right to choose your own path. Jolene touched the exposed brick wall, feeling its rough texture. And now? Now I'm asking, not telling, not deciding, just asking. He pulled out another set of papers. This is a business proposal. You would own 51% of this location. Complete creative control. The only catch is you have to let me be your partner, not because I want to control you, but because I believe in you. She took the papers, scanning them. Everything was there. All the protections and independence she would need, along with the resources to make her dreams reality. And the other Sweet Dreams locations will continue under their current management. This space would be completely separate. Your own brand, your own vision. He hesitated. And I just want to be part of it, part of your dream. Jolene walked to the windows, watching early morning commuters hurry past. You hurt me, Ashton, not by buying this place, but by not trusting me enough to include me in the decision. I know. He moved to stand beside her, their reflections overlapping in the glass. I've spent so long making decisions alone, protecting myself from feeling anything too deeply. Then you kissed me that night at l'Étoile, and suddenly everything changed. You made me feel alive again, made me want things I thought I'd never want after losing Rachel and James. What things? She asked softly. A future, a partnership, a chance to build something beautiful with someone who sees me for who I am, not what I own. He turned to face her. I love you, Jolene Carter. Not because you need fixing or saving, but because you're the strongest, most incredible person I've ever met. Jolene felt tears prick her eyes. You've never said that before. I should have. Every day since that first kiss. He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm asking for a chance to do this right, to be partners in every sense of the word. She looked around the empty space again, but now she saw possibilities instead of problems. She saw morning sunlight on fresh-baked croissants, heard the laughter of customers becoming friends, smelled the promise of new beginnings. Partners, she said thoughtfully, that means we make decisions together. All of them, he agreed. I promise. And you have to let me pay you back for my share, even if it takes years. Whatever you want, and no more surprise acquisitions. He smiled. Not without consulting my partner first. Jolene walked to the center of the room, closing her eyes. She could feel it, the potential, the dream she'd carried for so long starting to take solid form. When she opened her eyes, Ashton was watching her with such love and hope that it made her heart ache. Okay, she said. Okay, let's be partners. She held up the business proposal. But we're going through this line by line with my lawyer. His smile was radiant. You have a lawyer? Naomi's sister. She specializes in small business law. Jolene raised an eyebrow. What? You thought I wouldn't do my homework? Ashton laughed, the sound echoing through the empty space like a promise. He stepped toward her, then hesitated. Can I? She closed the distance between them, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. Unlike their first kiss, this one was built on understanding, on choices made with open eyes and full hearts. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. I love you too, you know, she whispered. Even when you're being an overprotective, controlling, ridiculously wealthy idiot. Good to know where we stand, he murmured, pulling her closer. Just then, the door chimed. They turned to find Danny and Naomi entering, carrying boxes from Sal's. We figured either you'd kill each other or make up, Naomi said. Either way, someone would need breakfast. And witnesses, Danny added cheerfully. Jolene looked at their friends, then at Ashton, then at the empty space around them, a space full of possibilities and new beginnings. This wasn't how she'd imagined achieving her dreams, But maybe that was the point. Sometimes love, like life, surprised you with better plans than you could make on your own. Well, she said, taking Ashton's hand, should we show our friends what we're going to build here? His squeeze of her hand said everything. About partnership, about trust, about the kind of love that builds things instead of walls. Together, they began to share their vision, their words overlapping with excitement as morning light filled the space with golden promise. Outside, New York City rushed past, but inside this brick-walled sanctuary, time seemed to slow. This was a moment of beginning, not just for a bakery, but for two people learning that the best dreams are the ones you build together, brick by careful brick, sweet by precious sweet. The transformation of the old Sweet Dream space into Rose and Crown Bakery, named in honor of Jolene's grandmother and Ashton's British heritage, was well underway. 3 weeks into renovations, Jolene stood amid the controlled chaos, watching workers install the vintage-inspired light fixtures she'd chosen. The morning sun streamed through the newly cleaned windows, catching dust motes in its golden rays. "The antique display case arrives tomorrow," Ashton said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "The one we found in that little shop in Brooklyn." Jolene leaned back against him, savoring the moment. "And the custom ovens." "Next week, though I still think—" "No," she cut him off with a smile. "We agreed. No top-of-the-line industrial equipment. This isn't a factory. It's a home for my grandmother's recipes." He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Speaking of your grandmother," Jolene tensed slightly. She hadn't told Rose about their partnership yet, personal or professional. Her grandmother had raised her to be independent, to never rely on anyone else for her success. How could she explain that sharing her dream didn't mean giving it up? "Still haven't told her," Ashton guessed. "I'm waiting for the right moment, like when we're already open and successful." Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the construction noise. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Victoria stood in the doorway, impeccable in a designer suit, her smile sharp as a knife. "I heard rumors about what you were doing with my family's investment, but I had to see it for myself." "The board approved the separate branding for this location," Ashton said, his voice taking on the cool tone he used in business meetings. "Yes, they did." Victoria moved through the space, running a manicured finger along an unfinished counter. "Though they might reconsider if they knew you were letting sentiment cloud your judgment." "Sentiment has nothing to do with it." Jolene stepped forward. "We have a solid business plan, market research." "Of course you do, dear." Victoria's condescension was palpable. "Just like I'm sure you have an excellent reason for using my sister's foundation money to fund your little project." Jolene felt Ashton go still beside her. "Now what are you talking about?" "Oh." Victoria's surprise seemed practiced. "Didn't Ashton tell you? Sweet Dreams was one of Rachel's pet projects. The foundation owns 30% of the company's shares, which means your charming little bakery is being partially funded by my dead sister's money." The silence that followed was deafening. Jolene turned to Ashton, seeing the truth in his stricken expression. "Is that true?" "It's more complicated than that," he started. "Is it true?" "Yes." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "But the foundation's shares are being bought out as part of the restructuring. I was going to tell you." "When?" Jolene's voice cracked. "After we opened, after I'd already committed everything to this place." "I think I'll leave you two to discuss this," Victoria said sweetly. "Oh, and Ashton. The foundation board meets next week. I'm sure they'll be fascinated by your creative use of resources." After she left, the construction noise seemed unnaturally loud. Jolene moved to the windows, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. "Every time I think we're past the secrets, this isn't like before," Ashton said. "The foundation's involvement was always temporary. I'm buying out their shares personally." "That's not the point." She turned to face him. "The point is you didn't tell me. Again, the point is I'm standing in a space that was special to your dead wife, trying to build my dream on top of hers, and I didn't even know it. Jolene, how am I supposed to compete with a ghost?" The question hung in the air between them. Ashton's face softened. "You're not competing with anyone." Rachel loved Sweet Dreams because it represented possibility, taking something traditional and making it new, just like what we're doing here. "But that's not all we're doing, is it?" Jolene gestured around them. "We're also building us, a future, and I need to know that there's room for that future, that I'm not just filling a space she left behind." Ashton crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her face in his hands. "Listen to me. What Rachel and I had was beautiful, and yes, part of me will always love her. But what you and I are building, this is different. This is choosing to love again, choosing to build something new together. You're not a replacement, Jolene. You're a new chapter. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, but Victoria's words had awakened doubts she thought she'd put to rest. I need some air, she said, pulling away. And time to think. Don't let Victoria win, he pleaded. This is what she wants, to drive us apart. No, what she wants is to protect her sister's legacy. Jolene grabbed her coat. And maybe she's right to worry about the person trying to erase it. You're not erasing anything. But Jolene was already pushing through the construction workers out into the crisp autumn air. She walked aimlessly, letting the city's rhythm wash over her. Eventually, she found herself in front of her grandmother's small house in Brooklyn. Rose Carter opened the door before Jolene could knock. One look at her granddaughter's face, and she stepped aside. Come on in, baby. I just made tea. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and wisdom, the same combination that had comforted Jolene through every crisis of her life. She sank into the worn kitchen chair, watching her grandmother pour tea into delicate cups that had survived 3 generations. So, Rose said, sliding a cup toward her, tell me about the man who's got you looking like you're carrying the world on your shoulders. Jolene's head snapped up. How did you... Baby, I've known since you started coming to Sunday dinner with leftover pastries that were way too fancy for your kitchen. Rose's eyes twinkled. That's Hans, and Naomi's mama told me all about the handsome CEO who's been helping you build your dream bakery. I was going to tell you, Jolene said quickly. I didn't want you to think I was taking the easy way out. Easy? Rose laughed. Love ain't never easy, child. Neither is building something real. She reached across the table, taking Jolene's hand. You think I don't know about Ashton Blake, about his story. Loss recognizes loss, baby. And healing recognizes healing. But what if, Jolene swallowed hard, what if I'm just a replacement, a way for him to recreate what he lost? Now you listen to me, Rose's voice was firm but gentle. You can't replace a love that's past, but you can build a new one, right next to where the old one lived. Like planting a garden, the new flowers don't erase the ones that bloomed before. They just make the garden fuller, more beautiful. Jolene felt tears slip down her cheeks. When did you get so wise about love? Who do you think taught your mama about it? Rose smiled softly. Your daddy wasn't my first choice for her, you know. Too rich, too different from our world. But love doesn't care about worlds or differences. It cares about hearts that recognize each other, even when those hearts are scared. Especially then. Rose squeezed her hand. Now, when do I get to see this bakery you're building, and meet this man who's smart enough to know he needs my granddaughter to make his life sweet? For the first time that day, Jolene laughed. She pulled out her phone, showing her grandmother pictures of the renovation, explaining their vision. As she talked, she felt the knots in her chest loosening. Rose asked questions, offered suggestions, but mostly just listened with the kind of understanding that came from a lifetime of watching love grow in unexpected places. Later, as the sun was setting, Jolene's phone buzzed with a text from Ashton. The antique display case arrived early. Come see it. I promise no more secrets. Just us building something beautiful together. She showed the message to her grandmother, who smiled knowingly. Go, Rose said, but bring him to Sunday dinner this week. I need to make sure he knows that loving a Carter woman means loving all of us. Jolene hugged her grandmother tight, breathing in the familiar scent of cinnamon and comfort. Then she typed a reply. On my way. And by the way, you're having dinner with my grandmother on Sunday? His response came immediately. Looking forward to meeting the woman who taught you how to make life sweeter. I love you. As Jolene headed back to their bakery, their shared dream, she felt lighter. Victoria's words still echoed, but now they were overshadowed by her grandmother's wisdom. Love wasn't about replacing or competing. It was about growing something new while honoring what came before. The construction lights were still on when she arrived, casting a warm glow through the windows. Through the glass, she could see Ashton standing near the newly installed display case, running his hand along its aged wood. He looked up as she entered, hope and love plain on his face. It's perfect, she said, moving to stand beside him. Just like my grandmother's. Does that mean... She took his hand. It means we keep building, together. No more secrets, no more ghosts. Just us making something beautiful out of all our broken and healing pieces. His smile was worth every doubt, every fear she'd pushed through to get back here. I can work with that, he said, pulling her close. Ashton Blake had faced hostile takeovers, billion-dollar negotiations, and ruthless competitors, But nothing had prepared him for the nervous energy coursing through his veins as he stood outside Rose Carter's Brooklyn brownstone. He adjusted the wine bottle in his hands, a rare vintage he'd spent hours selecting, and glanced at Jolene. "Stop fidgeting," she said, amused. "She's my grandmother, not a board of directors. Board members are easier. They only care about profit margins." He tugged at his casual sweater, missing the armor of his usual suits. "Your grandmother cares about your happiness." "Exactly." Jolene squeezed his hand. "And you make me happy." Before he could respond, the door swung open. Rose Carter stood before them, a small woman with Jolene's warm brown eyes and an aura of quiet authority that made Ashton understand exactly where his girlfriend got her strength. "So," Rose said, looking him up and down, "you're the man who's been baking up trouble with my granddaughter." Yes, ma'am." Ashton held out the wine. "I brought—" "Put that fancy bottle away." Rose waved him off. "Tonight we're drinking my special sweet tea family recipe." She emphasized the word family in a way that made it clear this was a test. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, filled with the kind of lived-in comfort that no amount of money could buy. Photos covered the walls. Jolene through the years, her parents, generations of Carters smiling down at them. The smell of something amazing wafted from the kitchen. "Is that—" Jolene's eyes lit up. "Your mama's favorite pot roast," Rose confirmed. "With those honey-glazed carrots you used to fight your cousin Michael over." Ashton watched Jolene disappear into the kitchen, leaving him alone with Rose. The older woman gestured for him to sit at the small dining table, its wood worn smooth by years of family gatherings. "So," Rose said, settling across from him, "tell me about your intentions with my grandbaby's heart." "I love her," Ashton said simply, deciding honesty was his best strategy. "More than I thought I could love anyone again after losing my wife and son." Something softened in Rose's expression. "Loss has a way of teaching us what matters, doesn't it? But loving again, that takes courage. Jolene taught me that courage. She—" He paused, searching for the right words. "She didn't try to fix my broken pieces. She just showed me they could be part of something beautiful. Like kintsugi." Rose nodded. At his surprised look, she smiled. "I wasn't always a baker in Brooklyn. I studied art history before life had other plans. Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, making something more beautiful for having been broken." From the kitchen came the sound of Jolene singing, an old Motown song she'd mentioned her mother used to dance to. The familiar melody wrapped around them like a warm embrace. "She doesn't know I know about Victoria," Rose said suddenly, her voice low. "About the threats to contest Rachel's foundation shares in Sweet Dreams." Ashton stiffened. "How did you—" "I may be retired, but I still read the business pages, and I have friends who know things." Rose's eyes were sharp. "You haven't told Jolene?" "I'm handling it," he said. "Victoria's trying to use Rachel's memory to drive us apart. I won't let that happen." "No," Rose agreed. "You won't. Because my granddaughter deserves someone who fights for her happiness as hard as she fights for everyone else's." She leaned forward. "But she also deserves the truth, all of it." Before Ashton could respond, Jolene returned with a tray of appetizers, her grandmother's famous cheese straws. "What are you two conspiring about?" "Just sharing recipes," Rose said smoothly. Ashton was about to tell me his plans for handling Victoria's latest attempt to sabotage the bakery. Jolene froze. "What attempt?" Ashton met Rose's steady gaze, understanding the challenge in her eyes. Taking a deep breath, he told Jolene everything about Victoria's threats to contest the Foundation's share transfer, about the legal battles that could delay their opening. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jolene asked, but her voice held more concern than anger. "Because I wanted to protect you from this fight. It's my past, my burden." "No," Jolene cut him off. "It's our future, our dream. We face things together now, remember?" Rose watched them with approval. "Now that's settled. Let's eat." Food has a way of making even legal battles seem manageable. The pot roast was everything Ashton had imagined from Jolene's stories. Tender, perfectly seasoned, infused with the kind of love that turned a meal into a memory. As they ate, Rose shared stories of Jolene's childhood, of her parents' love story, of the generations of strong women who had built lives from determination and flower. "Your mother was a lot like you," Rose told Jolene. "She fell in love with your father, despite all the reasons not to. Different worlds, different backgrounds, but love has a way of building bridges between worlds." "Is that your way of giving us your blessing?" Jolene asked, half joking. Baby, my blessing isn't what matters. What matters is that you're building something real, both of you. Rose looked between them. A bakery, a life, a love that honors the past while creating its own future. After dinner, as Jolene cleared the plates, Rose took Ashton into her small study. From a drawer, she pulled out a worn leather recipe book. These are the original Carter family recipes, she said. 5 generations of love baked into every page. I was going to give them to Jolene when the bakery opened, but she pressed the book into his hands. I think you should be the one to give it to her. I don't know what to say. Say you'll protect her heart as fiercely as you protect her dreams. Say you'll be honest with her, even when the truth is hard. Say you'll remember that love, like the best recipes, takes time and patience to perfect. Ashton held the book carefully, feeling the weight of trust it represented. I promise. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand through Brooklyn's quiet streets, Jolene nudged him playfully. So did you survive your first Carter family dinner? More than survived. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. I think I finally understand where you get your strength from. Your grandmother is, intimidating, overwhelming, remarkable, like her granddaughter. They stopped at a small park, the same one where Jolene used to play as a child. The autumn night was crisp, stars barely visible through the city's glow. About Victoria, Jolene said softly. Whatever she throws at us, we face it together. No more trying to protect me by keeping secrets. No more secrets, he agreed. From his coat, he pulled out Rose's recipe book, starting with this. Jolene's eyes widened as she recognized the book. Is that? Your grandmother wanted me to give it to you. For our bakery. He watched her trace the worn cover reverently. She said something about love being like the best recipes, taking time and patience to perfect. Tears shimmered in Jolene's eyes as she opened the book, finding her mother's handwriting mixed with her grandmother's. Generations of love spelled out in cups and teaspoons. We're really doing this, aren't we? She whispered. Building a life together, a future. One recipe at a time, he said, pulling her close. And I can't wait to taste every moment of it. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the Brooklyn sky, a rare sight in the city. Jolene pointed to it excitedly, the way she must have done as a child in this same park. Make a wish, she said. Ashton looked at her, this remarkable woman who had brought him back to life with a kiss, who had taught him to believe in second chances and new beginnings. Don't need to, he said softly. Well, I already have everything I could wish for. As they walked home, the recipe book tucked safely between them, both knew that whatever challenges Victoria or life threw at them, they would face them together. Their love, like the best family recipes, had been tested by fire and found perfect in its own imperfect way. The morning of Rose and Crown Bakery's opening dawned clear and crisp, autumn sunshine gilding the Manhattan streets. Jolene stood in the center of her finished bakery, their bakery, taking in every detail. The antique display case gleamed, already filled with her grandmother's recipes brought to life. Mismatched vintage chairs clustered around small tables, each one chosen with care. The exposed brick walls held framed photos, her parents, wedding day, Ashton with Rachel and James, Rose in her first bakery, all the pieces of their past that had led them here. Having second thoughts, Ashton's voice came from behind her. He'd foregone his usual suit for dark jeans and a white button-down, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him on a business day. No, she said, turning to face him. Just making sure this is real. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. Very real, though I'm still not sure about the name. Rose for my grandmother. Crown for your British roots. She smiled up at him. Perfect blend of our worlds, just like us. The bell above the door chimed, and Danny burst in, looking harried. We have a situation. Victoria's outside with reporters. Jolene felt Ashton tense. After weeks of legal battles over the Foundation's shares, Victoria had gone suspiciously quiet. They should have known she'd planned something for opening day. Let her come, Jolene said firmly. This is our day. We've earned it. As if on cue, Victoria swept in, trailing journalists and photographers. She looked elegant as always, but there was something different in her expression. Less sharp, more uncertain. Well, she said, looking around, this isn't what I expected. What did you expect? Jolene asked. A cheap imitation of what Rachel built. Victoria moved to the wall of photos, stopping at the one of Rachel and Ashton. Instead, you've created something new. Something that honors her memory while building your own legacy. The journalists shifted awkwardly, sensing this wasn't the drama they'd been promised. Victoria turned to face them. "I called you here because I expected to find proof that my sister's legacy was being destroyed." Her voice carried clearly. "Instead, I found proof that love doesn't end with loss. It transforms, grows, creates something new." Ashton stepped forward. "Victoria, the Foundation is withdrawing all objections to the share transfer," she announced, and she pulled out an envelope. "I'd like to place the first order for the Foundation's annual memorial gala." Jolene took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why?" "Because Rachel always said love was like baking. You have to be brave enough to try new recipes." Victoria's smile was small, but genuine. She would have liked this place. "And she would have liked you, Jolene Carter." Before anyone could respond, the front door chimed again. Rose entered, carrying a covered dish, followed by Naomi and what seemed like half of Brooklyn. "Hope you don't mind," Rose called out. "But word got around that my grandbaby's bakery was opening, and well," she gestured to the crowd of familiar faces, regulars from L'Etoile, neighbors, friends, all carrying dishes and stories and love. The next hours passed in a blur, the bakery filled with laughter and conversation, with people discovering Jolene's creations and sharing their own family recipes. The reporters, finding a different story than they expected, wrote about community and healing, about a place where Wall Street bankers sat beside Brooklyn grandmothers, all brought together by the universal language of breaking bread. Late that afternoon, as the crowd thinned, Jolene found a quiet moment in the kitchen. She was putting the finishing touches on a special cake when she felt Ashton's presence behind her. "Hiding?" he asked softly. "Creating?" She stepped back, revealing the cake. It was elegant in its simplicity, layers of vanilla bean cake with lavender buttercream, decorated with crystallized flowers. "It's for Rachel and James, for the memorial gala." Ashton's breath caught. On top of the cake, written in delicate script, were the words "Love transforms." "Victoria was right," Jolene said. "Love doesn't end with loss. It changes us, teaches us, gives us courage to try again." She turned to face him. "You taught me that." "No," he smiled, touching her flour-dusted cheek. "We taught each other." From the front of the bakery came the sound of Rose's laugh mixing with Victoria's, of Danny trying to convince Naomi to try his horrible British accent, of strangers becoming friends over shared slices of cake. "Listen," Ashton said, pulling Jolene to the kitchen doorway. "How that's the sound of worlds colliding in the best possible way." Speaking of colliding worlds, Jolene reached into her apron pocket, pulling out a small, flour-dusted envelope. "I have something for you." Inside was a key to her Brooklyn apartment. "Move in with me," she said. "Not to your penthouse, not to some new place. To my small, imperfect apartment with the temperamental oven and the fire escape garden. Your grandmother's building?" His eyes sparkled with understanding. "Where I learned to bake, where I dreamed of this day." She touched his chest, feeling his heart beat under her palm. "Where I started falling in love with you over pizza and possibilities." Instead of answering, Ashton pulled her into a kiss that tasted of sugar and promises. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Yes," he whispered, "to small apartments and big dreams, to temperamental ovens and love that transforms." "Well, thank goodness that's settled." Rose's voice came from behind them. They turned to find her holding her recipe book. "Because I have a few more family recipes to teach you both. Can't have my future great-grandchildren growing up without knowing how to make a proper Carter family cobbler." "Grandma?" Jolene blushed. "What? I'm not getting any younger, and that apartment has a spare room that would make a perfect nursery." Rose winked at Ashton. "Besides, your mama always said the best recipes take time to perfect, just like the best loves." Later that night, after the last guest had left and the kitchen was clean, Jolene and Ashton stood outside their bakery. The street was quiet, the autumn wind carrying the lingering scent of baked promises and new beginnings. "Do you remember," Jolene asked, "that night at L'Etoile, when I kissed a stranger because he looked lost?" "I remember everything about that moment," Ashton said. "The way you saw through all my walls, the way you reminded me I was still alive. I never thought that kiss would lead to this." She gestured to the bakery, to the life they'd built, to family recipes and healing hearts, to worlds colliding and love transforming. "I never thought I'd find home again," he said softly. "But that's what you are, what we've built here." "Home?" Above them, the new sign glowed softly. "Rose and Crown Bakery, where love rises." Below it, in smaller letters, "Every heart deserves a second chance at sweetness." As they walked home through the Brooklyn streets, their fingers intertwined, both knew that this wasn't an ending but a beginning. Their love story, like the best recipes, would continue to evolve, rich with tradition, yet open to new possibilities, grounded in the past, but rising toward the future. And in the end, that was the sweetest truth of all. That love, like bread, rises best when you trust in the process, when you're brave enough to try new recipes, when you believe that even the most broken hearts can be made whole again, transformed by time and patience and the courage to begin again. In her apartment that night, as Ashton slept beside her, Jolene added her own note to her grandmother's recipe book. The secret ingredient is always love, love that heals, love that transforms, love that rises against all odds. Mix well, bake with patience, serve with joy, yields one perfectly imperfect, happily ever after. The end. What decision would you have made in Jolene's place after finding out about the Foundation's involvement in Ashton's business? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.